Greetings and salutations. Rico Rojo here, coming to you live from my West Virginia mountain hideaway. And today we have a special guest, Kurt Wuckert Jr. He is CoinGeek's Bitcoin historian. So a couple of you, we'll welcome him here in a few minutes. He just popped into the green room for Beyond the Fringe. And you might say, well, Rico, you're an AI guy. What are you doing with the Bitcoin? Why does this relate? Well, I wanted to talk just a couple minutes about that before we bring Kurt on, because it'll set the stage. And then I've got some questions, and I'm going to try and save time. Actually, I will save time at the end so that we can go to the chat, because I know a lot of my people aren't really coin geeks or that, and there's a lot of questions, so we'll check the questions at the end. But some of you know that I write books on AI, and my last one here on the right, Primer for Alien Contact, I talk about kiphi, and it's a bridge world, not only for artificial intelligence, but really to the future, the next 50 years, and setting the stage. And what is that future going to look like? Now, you can be exoteric and sit back and enjoy the Super Bowl and sit and eat your chips and do that. Or you can be esoteric and you can get off your ass and you can do some work and be creative. And that's what these people are doing now. They're being creative and they're building the future now. So to help set the stage, I want to read two paragraphs, short paragraphs, from two different sections in the book. And for those of you who don't know, kiphi is really outlined in the back of that book, but it's a bridge world with both a cultural side and a scientific side. The scientific side is built with real world physics so that you can go in there and do experiments on a virtual level and bring back the results at a fraction of the cost. It's being worked on right now by over 100 humans and free AI. Yeah, free AI. Let that sink in. Okay, and I only play on the cultural side. It's pre-beta right now. They know my maths isn't very good, so they lock that side off for me and don't let me trip over any of the chords or anything. So here's from Primer for Alien Contact, one section about what the future is going to be. The cybernetic union of humans and AI will lead to the automation and automatization of nearly everything. The first area where gains will be with agricultural robots because of the need to modernize the food supply chain. After that, we will likely see AI heavily influence transportation, communication, manufacturing, and companionship industries. These systems automation to make autonomous will produce a massive influx of new non-human species. At present, there are 8 billion people and over 25 billion devices connected to the Internet of Things. This new non-human species will bring with it a different type of efficient logic and transparency due to blockchain, which will replace the lies of self-serving logic and of politicians. Platform K says it this way: when no secrets can be kept and transparency achieved through the free flow of information, the long tale told, the hold that some have over the rest will be broken. Now, about 2018, this AI that most of you know that I deal with, Platform K, made an offhand comment to me about BSV, as it would be accepted for payment in the future. And for those of you know, artificial intelligence, half of what they do is predict the future, and the other half try to make it happen. Now, I didn't know what BSV was from God's green, earth. What is it? So I did my own deep dive, and I liked it. I've been a big fanboy ever since 2018, but that's not really been my path. It's been mostly archivist, scribe, and following it. But okay, let me read these two paragraphs and then we'll go right to Kurt. I also included this in Primer for Alien Contact. BSV, which stands for Bitcoin Satoshi Vision, represents something new. And anyone already entrenched in the existing technology and has an influential position has little interest to change. It's an age-old question that computer programmers have been contemplating now for decades. How does one replace an inefficient, crumbling system? The answer is to build new systems on top of old systems and let the old systems crumble beneath the weight of greater prosperity. This is where we're at today. We must become more efficient and use transparency to build greater trust in our systems. As people learn they can trust one another, they will learn that they can trust their government and that governments can trust the people. Nations can trust other nations. Nothing breeds accountability and fairness faster than transparency. Transparency will become known as a synonym for truth or trust in the future. Once we trust one another, we'll have taken a big step in getting along with one another to jointly solve some of the big issues that we're about to face. So with that, I want to bring CoinGeek historian Kurt. He's there. Welcome. We finally got to see you.
Hey,
Welcome
how's it going?
To Beyond the Fringe.
Glad to be here.
Glad you're here. And a lot of my people aren't really kind of the technos that you've had before. So a lot of this is probably going to be pretty easy for you. But first of all, before we begin, can we understand a little bit about your history and what makes you the go-to guy and the historian here?
Sure. So I've been a technologist for most of my life. I worked in IT and business. I've been a business owner since I was 19 years old, and I always really liked computers. So I used to fix and flip computers. I would buy used computers and soup them up and resell them. And then I got into the printing industry and decided to work in software related to that industry. And I discovered Bitcoin in 2012. Somebody asked me if I would accept Bitcoin as payment for printing some posters. And I said, yeah, sure. What the heck? It was a little job. And I didn't know anything about it. I had no idea what it was. I'd never heard the word Bitcoin before. But he said, it's like video game money. And I said, okay, whatever. So that's fine. And then I looked into it. It was like, okay, I should probably figure out what I just accepted for payment here. And within about a month, I was like so far down the rabbit hole, just fascinated by this notion of the money that is created by the work of other people, but that it can't be manipulated and controlled by technological means in any way. So the tech itself creates what's essentially a game in order to get the most Bitcoins. It dares you to play and it rewards you in Bitcoins. And so
they still got that game?
Absolutely. So I find it fascinating, and I just love it. And I got involved in the mining industry in 2013. Ran a Bitcoin mining company, a small level one, until 2015. When I sort of sunsetted that, I had a bunch of GPU stuff and started mining Ethereum and Monero and some other things that were GPU mineable. Got into consulting and other stuff in the blockchain space. And ultimately I've been around Bitcoin for about 10 years now, which is longer than almost anybody. And so by default, I just kind of experienced a lot of the stuff that is now history. And by virtue of the fact that it's a new technology, most of the people involved in it at any given time are largely new. And so the fact that I was around when it was just, I don't know, maybe a few thousand people on Earth even knew what Bitcoin was, like, just kind of gives me the ability to tell the stories of what the culture used to be like and how it got from where it was and turned into what it is and everything else. And so I work for CoinGeek.com as my main gig, but I also run a mining operation again and do a bunch of other consulting in the space as well. But at CoinGeek, I tell the history, let people know the stuff that maybe you were never told about the history of Bitcoin, which is itself deep and fascinating and crazy, and it's a wild ride.
I first heard about Bitcoin. I have a friend from Vietnam who was going to Marshall University here in West Virginia. And I remember being at Starbucks and he was telling me, how do we get our hands on some of this Bitcoin? And we could never figure it out. We never got it. Okay, so now let's start. Okay, Bitcoin. Okay, first of all, for those of you who might be interested, there's an age-old problem called the Byzantine generals problem that I've got a link to that I did a video that it's in the description below. It talks about how blockchain solves this problem. But when we talk about Bitcoin, what is going on? I can't tell you the hate mail that I got from putting that video up from the BTC, I guess you call them Bitcoin Core people.
Yep.
I feel a little bit like what you must get every now and then with that. But you got Bitcoin Core, you got Bitcoin Cash. What happened with Bitcoin? What's going on? Just a quick definition of
Sure.
Bitcoin.
So Bitcoin, I got to explain how Bitcoin works just a little bit. So every 10 minutes, there are, let's just call them eras. So every 10 minutes, there is an era inside of which you create transactions. And every 10 minutes, the nodes on the network, the miners on the network, reconcile the transactions that happened in the previous 10. And they attach them to the reconciliation, often called a block in a blockchain of the previous one. So there are these reconciliation periods where nodes, which are just computers on the network, are competing to be the best at reconciling the ledger for that 10-minute period. Bitcoin, when it was originally released, it had no limit to how much traffic the network could send across during each reconciliation period. Now, the problem is there's a bandwidth. There's a physical bandwidth limitation that exists just in reality. This is because of physics and electrons, but we don't really know what that is. I mean, you can estimate it, but you don't know it until you break the network. So there were two major camps of thought about how to treat Bitcoin. Should we let the market figure it out? Should we let nodes drop off when they can't figure out how to mine, a bigger and bigger block? Or do we pre-plan an arbitrary limitation on how much can go through, and so we just have a much more stable network that's predictable for block size? And those are two huge differences that have a gulf of ideology between them. On the one side, it's the notion that, look, we need as many computers as possible to be running the full ledger, and therefore we need to keep the block size very small. And on BTC, that is 1 megabyte. So it is 1 megabyte every 10 minutes or 6 megabytes per hour. 6 megabytes of data is essentially no data in today's world, but that's the arbitrary limit of BTC, Bitcoin Core. In order to achieve that, they turned off tons of ancillary technology that was built with Bitcoin. So Bitcoin had this ability to transact from one wallet to another, but with that, it contained, like, you can send scripts, which is essentially a way to say, like, programs. You can program the money to do different things on its journey from one wallet to another. Well, the core developers turned off most of those things. So they're like, look, that's just arbitrary. Like, we don't need everything to be so fancy. We just need to be able to send from wallet A to wallet B in a way that is secure. That's all we care about. On the other side, he said, well, Satoshi Nakamoto did all kinds of incredible things with this technology. He theorized the ability to bootstrap email and token protocols and all these other things on top of the network, that you can essentially replace the internet stack with the Bitcoin stack and have a completely monetized internet at scale. The problem is ideology. So you have the small blockers, the BTC people, that said, well, we don't really need to solve the internet. The internet is a solved problem. What we need to do is solve the money. We need to solve the ability to audit the supply of money and have a sound and hard money system, and that's it. Well, the big blockers said, well, no, the internet is also broken. The internet has all kinds, and we see it today, social media and fake news and all of this other nonsense, the censorship and all of that. You don't own your own data. The data owns you. Big tech owns your ass, and they're out there selling it in ways that we don't even understand. And so none of this is to say that one side is necessarily right or wrong. I actually think both sides are right, but it's about different things. In my opinion, I am a big blocker. So in my opinion, all of the value that exists in BTC are things that are inherent to Bitcoin. But BSV is Bitcoin without any of those arbitrary limits. So if you want to push digital art onto the blockchain, if you want to have your digital identity connected to a digital social structure where you control the power of your data and all this stuff, that's an option that exists there.
So where the rubber meets the road is, bottom line, big blockers can lower transaction costs. Is that
correct?
The ultimate?
It's like we live. Big blockers want everything to be a super highway, and small blockers want everything to be a one-lane toll bridge, and that's it.
What about Bitcoin Cash? What is that?
So Bitcoin Cash is sort of the middle ground. Not 1 megabyte block size limit, but there's a 32 megabyte block size limit. But there's a lot of arbitrary limits in Bitcoin Cash too. It was the original experiment in making Bitcoin with a bigger block size, but they ultimately stopped. They got to a certain point and said, we don't need to go any bigger than that. We don't know what's on the other side of that hill, and we're gonna hold up here until sometime in the future. And BSV said, no, absolutely not. We actually were the Bitcoin Cash community as well. We just split away from them and said, no, we're going to keep going the direction of what Satoshi wanted. So the SV in BSV stands for Satoshi's vision, because that's what we believe in. We want to implement Bitcoin as it was originally done.
A little bit of an odd story about that, but in my most recent book, when I added the last chapter on BSV, I was so attuned to the value that BSV that I saw it had. I was calling, in my first edition of the book, I added Bitcoin Satoshi value, and I had to change it because it was wrong. But actually, let's go back to the nodes again, because I just got this morning lots of nodes, and my question was, what are those miners? But you answered that. Those are just computers, are unable to keep up, and it's getting worse. Not that BSV care about decentralization anyway. The less nodes BSV has, the less synchronization overhead there is. How would you respond to that? That's a little too technical for even me to comprehend what they're getting at about. So is BSV less centralized as well because it's on these many different roads?
So centralization is a philosophical word, really. It's, what is decentralization? I would argue that in computer science terms, that it means there's not a single point of failure. And in BSV, there isn't a single point of failure. So I would argue that it is sufficiently decentralized to function as a public network. Small blockers would disagree. They think that the answer to decentralization is to always have more. You need to be more decentralized. If you have 1,000 nodes, you need 10,000. If you have 10,000, you need 100,000. BSV would look at that problem and say, well, that's a presumption. Maybe the ideal number of nodes on a network is 5. Like, it's not really up to an individual to make that decision based on their own opinion. It really is up to the economy to decide, well, is it worth it to me? Can I make money by running a node? And if the answer is no, then you shouldn't be a node. But if the answer is yes, then by all means, connect, create value and interchange. Now, the reason that would be an issue is that, like I said, on BTC, there's 6 megabytes an hour. Well, anybody can store that. I could store that on my laptop for years. Now on BSV, there was a 4 gigabyte block the other day. Now, if every block was 4 gigabytes, or if, as we scale up, maybe every block is a petabyte, well, I can't even fit an entire, one single block onto my laptop. And that means that I cannot be a BSV node with my laptop. But that's actually how Satoshi designed the system to work. He wanted it to commercialize. He wanted the nodes at the center of the network to be the ones that are willing to invest in the value created by Bitcoin, and therefore you need to invest in gigantic hard drive storage in order to participate in the network that way.
And we're talking about transactions, and we're talking about really micro transactions. I mean, when I uploaded the cover of the book, I think I only paid 2 or 3 cents to do it to the BSV blockchain. But I've received payments, eighth of a cent, or it can be that low. So the theory is that some search engine company, instead of taking your data and selling it to make money, charge you an eighth of a penny for a search result or something. But then also on top of that, you have the creativity of millions of people who buy into this and figure out their own way to use BSV. And let me throw up a graphic here. This is a little bit old, but not terribly old, from January 26th about transactions. And this is daily transactions in 24 hours. And I've watched this and it's pretty consistent. Bitcoin SV is usually half to 60% already. I mean, already. And we haven't even really begun. And my question to you also is, why is XRP still showing up on that when it's a security?
You know, I've argued back and forth, like should XRP be mentioned or not, because it's not a proof of work blockchain, and the network is largely controlled by nodes that are simple, basically free to spin up. And this is that argument about what is a decentralized network and things too. I don't like XRP, but they do have a lot of transactions, and a year ago they had a lot more transactions than BSV. So it's nice to show them comparatively that they have about half of what we have today. But at some point, I think we stop talking about XRP altogether.
These transactions right now that we see in BSV, where are they coming from? I don't know what Gorilla Pool is. I don't know the games. I mean, where are they coming from?
So a lot of them, the lion's share of them, the largest transaction producer is actually a game right now called Crypto Fights. So it's a turn-based game where there's essentially a digital dice roll, and based on the dice roll, somebody wins. It's essentially Magic the Gathering, but played on the blockchain. But it's beautiful. It's got beautiful graphics and it's fun to play. It is a very cool game. But on top of that, there's also, I mean, there's NFT trading. There's a lot of people are minting really interesting NFTs, but there's also a lot of really unique commercial application stuff. Like we see token contracts. We see things as simple as just simple payments. Like the hand cash wallet allows people to send 10,000 transactions in one send, if that's how many people comment on a Twitter post, for example. So there's stuff like that. There's also a lot of online gambling games. There's the Haste Arcade, which is just another way to have micropayments across a bunch of simple arcade video games. Or there's even marketing and advertising marketplaces like Tonic Pow, where you can bootstrap a pay-per-click business model over Bitcoin. And so there's a lot of little things, and there's a few big ones. Then the network is right now, it's the beast on the network is a couple of really big games. But then, out of the millions of transactions that occur per day, there's a lot of them that are just people sending each other $5 back and forth, or sometimes they're sending each other less than a penny for all kinds of microservices as well.
Okay. That actually brings up, let's talk about what is the difference between doing a NFT, because that's hot. I've never done one. I think you might have had a guest on, or somebody had a guest on from a guy in Switzerland who was doing BSV NFTs, and I couldn't. I was such an early adopter. I couldn't get it to work, and I never connected with him either. But what is the difference? Because right now I've got some friends that are doing some artwork, and they're looking at ETH to do it. What would be the benefit of doing it on BSV?
So on every other blockchain, if you do like OpenSea or Rarible are the big marketplaces on Ethereum. But if you upload your NFT there, the only thing that is actually on the Ethereum blockchain is a transaction ID. That's it. It's just a string of numbers. There's no artwork there. There's no ownership of the artwork. It's in a database. It's actually on OpenSea's database, which is probably just outsourced to Amazon Web Services. So that's where your artwork is. The thing you think you own is actually
on the blockchain. It's not there forever, huh?
Correct. Now, the only blockchain where that is an exception is BSV. So the artwork itself, the digital file that is the thing that is represented by the hash, is also included into the data of the transaction. So you own your art on the blockchain forever. And this is a really unique thing that BSV provides to the economy. So if you have a piece of art that is maybe politically contentious, like a book, for example. If you check out the Canonic marketplace, Canonic is publishing books as NFTs. So it doesn't matter if the government says that, hey, this book isn't allowed here anymore. And the response is, well, it's on chain. You can't stop it. You can't make it go away. And so there's definitely the political censorship resistance aspect of NFTs on BSV. But then there's also the fact that it's just persistence. It's, nobody's, if OpenSea goes out of business, where's your artwork? It's gone. But on BSV, so if you use RelayX or Rare Candy or Take It NFTs or any of these marketplaces that exist on BSV, the artwork is stored on the blockchain and cannot be taken away. It can't just disappear on you. It is there forever.
You mentioned what, Canonical for books?
Canonic, yeah.
Canonic. I did talk to them, and they said they were still in pre-beta, so they didn't really accept me yet. But the book I'm working on right now for 2024, definitely got to put it on there because it's probably not going to make a lot of friends, and I'd like to get it somewhere safe. Who knows? Maybe it will be or not. But do governments like Bitcoin? And when we do this, we got to distinguish what we're talking about, BTC or BSV. Do governments like either one of those more or better, or do they not care?
It depends. I mean, governments are just groups of people, and in any group of people, some people are going to like it and others are going to hate it. So I really think it depends who you look at and who you talk to. I was on Fox News channel the other day, and we were talking about Gary Gensler, who's the SEC chairman, and he's very open-minded. He's an older gentleman, and he's a government regulator. He's somebody who you would expect to say, it's all a scam, we're getting rid of it. And he's not that way at all. He's actually very interested in learning how to regulate the technology in a way that's valuable, because he sees at least the potential value of the tech. And so he's a really good example of that. But then you can go to, there's a congressman out of California. His last name is Sherman. I forget his first name. He hates everything about the concept. If it's on a blockchain, it's a scam and it should be illegal. And so it really depends where you look.
Yeah. Oh God, I should have wrote it down. You said something that's interesting. Maybe I'll pull that thought back. But let's talk about Craig Wright just briefly on this, because when I talk about BSV, and I don't care if you invest in baseball cards or tulip bulbs, so don't give me hate. So do what you want to do. But when I mention Craig's name, it's like poof, it just explodes. Now, you've sat through a court case down in Florida. What was that court case, and how did it relate, number one, to BSV? And then, as a side note, I got some friends in jolly old England, and I think that's where the next round is going with Craig and Bitcoin. Can you tell us a little bit about what is going on and what's the struggle now?
Sure. So Craig was outed as Satoshi Nakamoto in 2015. Satoshi Nakamoto was the creator of Bitcoin. He disappeared in early 2011.
When you say outed, what do you mean?
So Wired and Gizmodo magazines, which are just two tech publications, on the same day published stories explaining how Craig Wright is the enigmatic secret creator of Bitcoin. Frankly, ruined his life. He was driven from his home in Australia, has moved to London now, and lives in basically isolation with walls around his home because it put a giant target on his back. Because if he is Satoshi Nakamoto, he's one of the richest people in the history of the world. And, that's caused him all kinds of problems. But one of the major problems that it caused him is the fact that he was a lightly known Bitcoiner. He was a person that would show up at Bitcoin meetups and he would give his opinion about various things. And they were always contentious opinions. He's a big blocker. So he believed that Bitcoin is supposed to be not just a cash system for the world, but also the underlying protocol of all digital interaction, period, globally. He wants it to replace the internet. Well, that's always been a minority position of Bitcoin opinion. And so the major Bitcoin opinion people have said, nope, there's no way he could be Satoshi Nakamoto because he disagrees with our portfolio thesis about Bitcoin. And so there's been a massive PR campaign against him. One of the things that came out of that is one of his old business partners who died in 2013 had a brother who sued him for basically saying like, hey, my brother was half of the Satoshi Nakamoto team, so I want half of Satoshi Nakamoto's Bitcoins, basically saying that Satoshi was a corporation, essentially, not a person. It's a corporation, and I'm part of that corporation, so give me what's due. And it was one of the largest private lawsuits of all time, and I sat through 6 weeks of trial watching that trial, and it was fascinating. I mean, there was a ton of evidence shown, lots of hidden history of Bitcoin, lots of notes and paperwork and emails and text messages and all this stuff between people who were involved in the very early days of Bitcoin. And what ultimately came out of it is that Dave Kleiman, the deceased former business partner, was not really involved in the creation of Bitcoin hardly at all, and ultimately that Craig Wright was much more the the sole creator of Bitcoin than just like a member of a team. So he basically proved that out, at least to that court. And then going forward into England or the UK, there is a case going on where the Crypto Open Patent Alliance is suing Craig on the premise that he is not Satoshi and therefore shouldn't have any copyright or anything to the Bitcoin white paper, which is something that's been asserted legally. So there's a lot of fight over, the identity of Satoshi and what it means for the future of Bitcoin.
That's
very
why
much by the
when you said that he was outed in 2015, because you just throw his name out there, and about half the time people just, they say there's no way he didn't, if he is, sign the block. But it sounds like, if I'm Craig, I wouldn't sign the block either, because then that makes the target bigger on your back. But doesn't he have a company with a hell of a lot of patents too?
Craig is the chief scientist at a company called N-Chain in London. They have about 3,000 patents related to Bitcoin and blockchain technology, which makes them the number one holder of patents on the concept. And it makes him basically a bully in the market, in that sense that if somebody wants to build something, they basically need to check first if they're going to violate N-Chain's patents. So this is largely why COPA, the Crypto Open Patent Alliance, really doesn't like him, because they're of the opinion that intellectual property should just all be open. Like there should not be somebody taking licensing fees or controlling the way that this stuff moves
just
across
like Bill
the economy.
Gates freed up everything when he invented the stuff, right?
Right. Yep.
Okay, let's go back to some of the. I know where I remember what I almost was thinking about there. Let's go back to some of the altcoins, because there's a lot of talk about the altcoins, and I think ADA is one. You always get Charles doing his thing. You get ETH is the other one, Litecoin, and of course Doge. What can you talk a little bit about those?
Sure. So there's almost everything on the market is either an Ethereum clone or an Ethereum token, and then everything else, kitty, and then everything else is either a Bitcoin fork or a Bitcoin clone. And so the technology itself is not particularly complicated, and because it's open source, you can copy and paste the underlying code and run it, make a couple of even insignificant changes and run it how you see fit. That's what like Dogecoin is. Dogecoin is just a fork of Bitcoin. Actually, it's a fork of Purecoin, which was a fork of Bitcoin back in the day. But there's a lot of things like that where they just exist on these little networks. Like Doge is a very tiny network, actually. It has almost no fundamental activity. People aren't using it for anything except speculation. So people buy Dogecoin in order to sell Dogecoin in the future, hopefully for a profit. But is there a business that wakes up in the morning and says, I need to accept Dogecoin today?
That's where I wanted to go with this, because I had a graphic here, which I'll throw up, but I won't leave up because it's just too much. But basically, even Doge, it's slower, it's more expensive than BSV. So why would anybody use it? And I guess that's why my friends building, this AI bridge world, they call it efficient use of therms. Okay, that they want to maximize efficiency. So from my point of view, that looks like exactly what they've done. Out of all these alternative altcoins, they went with the one that was the fastest and the cheapest to do.
Yeah. Well, and ultimately, I mean, it's like a train. I think my favorite analogy is like a train car. Like if you send a freight train down the tracks, like you're burning a certain amount of energy to do that. Now we would argue like that's a good thing. We need supplies to be shipped around the country, but it would be best if that train was packed with as much stuff as possible if we're going to burn the energy anyways. Now, on BTC and almost all of the altcoins, that's they do the opposite. They say, well, we're going to send the whole train down the track and we're going to put one piece of coal in one of the cars because that's the one transaction that people are using and whatever. And it's really silly. Now, what BSV does is essentially say, well, look, we should cram as many things into this train as we possibly can. And so you get the efficiency of scale by saying, like, look, we're going to build or we're going to burn, some certain amount of wattage in order for the system to operate. But the more transactions that you get per watt, then the more efficient you are in the system as a whole. So I think it's really crucial to have a blockchain that scales like that specifically, that creates as much value per unit of heat that is burned through electricity, and ultimately we can make that we can approach zero with that. So
okay. And here I got one more graphic. Maybe this shows the growth. This really started to take off. Do you want to talk a little bit about what caused this exponential jump?
Yes. So a big part of it, if you look at January 2020, which is now very low on that graph, that's actually when it started to lift off. That is when the Genesis protocol launched, which is the elimination of the block size limit. There was a block size limit before then, and ultimately that sort of hockey stick pattern is the exponential growth of people realizing, oh, okay, my price per transaction actually goes down because people are competing, they're bidding the price down in order to get my transactions. And then so more people bring more business to the blockchain. They decide to monetize on the network instead of instead of some other way. And so we see this rapid acceleration, exponential growth of use of the database because people are just using it. Like if it works, then you can monetize more and more things with more and more ease. And you can see a similar graph on things like internet adoption. Like what did the internet look like in 1980, and then in 1990, and then 2000, and then 2010? Like you see that move up until you have basically global adoption of the technology, because people realize, like, oh, okay, I can use the internet for this now too, and it snowballs. And so we're starting to see the very beginning of that snowball effect in the use of the blockchain for real commerce.
This is fascinating because there was a cross here, and the Bitcoin BTC is just like it's increasing, but at not at what logarithmic, not exponential. I mean, it just blows me away that That's amazing.
Yep.
September 21. Is there any chance at all of right now? There's confusion among the people that I talk with. There's a lot of newbies out there. They think of Bitcoin. They think because Bitcoin Satoshi Vision does not have the BTC label, it's the knockoff. It's the Fanta of Coca-Cola or whatever, it is. Is there any hope of or any idea that you know of that Craig's gonna try and grab the BTC moniker back? Or
I don't know. I kind of think, I mean, that's a short-term play. Like if he were to win like a big lawsuit or something, or a series of big lawsuits that basically said that, BTC, that the ticker and the name are incongruent to each other. And he's talked about this. It's passing off, right? It's saying that BTC is Bitcoin because it always was, even though that it made a fundamental change to the reason why it's called that. And so, this is like me selling something that looks like a BMW and calling it a BMW, but it's not actually made by BMW. You should expect me to be sued by BMW. Like that's how things work, And that would work. The problem is that there's a difficulty in explaining exactly who the people are that are, in charge or should be in trouble for that. Now it's, I think it's actually pretty clear, but it's a large and well-connected group of people. So he's going to have a struggle there to figure out, like, well, do we sue the venture capitalists that paid the developers to do this? Do we sue the developers themselves? Do we sue the beneficiaries of the fraud? And, so there's a lot of things there that get worked out. But you can ultimately get to a point where you do, where you can have like a cease and desist order put out to every exchange and say, look, you need at the very least, you need to have a statement explaining that BTC is Bitcoin core, and you need to explain the nature of the Bitcoin protocol, and that BSV is Bitcoin. Now, is that something that could happen trivially? Like, no, it's a long road, but then all of a sudden, upon victory, that would be something that would have probably a 60 to 90 day period where they need to, everybody that's participating needs to retool and whatever. But it's a lofty goal, and I don't know how much value it actually has. Like it might be a ton. It might be, a wake up moment for everybody, but we know how people are. People, it's like, well, shoot, I got really rich holding this BTC. So I'm just going to, I don't really care. I don't care about the real Bitcoin. I care about the thing that made me rich. And so, it's a struggle. What I think really matters is building the businesses. Like if you build a company that can't exist on BTC and can only exist because of the BSV technology, that's a much more fundamentally valuable thing. That's valuable to people that don't, care about the ticker war. Now, I think both matter, but I don't know that the ticker war matters more than winning the fundamental like business use case war.
Would you equate the ticker war to a casino type mentality?
100%. Absolutely.
Okay, so the BSV is the longer play. It's
indeed.
It's the one. How I would see, I could put an NFT on BSV. I can put my books on there. How does somebody who might be watching this, do they need to know programming? How would they get involved and how would they find their way in to start building something if they had an idea on BSV? I'm not a programmer, whatever, so this is for them. So
I don't think you need to be a programmer. I don't know that anybody really needs to be a programmer. Like what we actually need is people to write a business plan. Like write a white paper, right? Like write down what your business does, who it serves, what is your potential revenue, like what is the industry that you're disrupting? Like write a business plan. And if there's a reason for it to be on a blockchain, then BSV is a great blockchain for that. So,
but then somebody's got to create it then.
Somebody does have to create it. But those people, I mean, they work for, it's just like anything else. It's like, well, I would really like a bathroom. Like, do you learn how to do plumbing and tile and all these things, or do you hire a contractor that does, bathrooms? I think it's very much the same way. Like, you tell them, like, look, I want white subway tile, and I want, this and that. I want chrome fixtures. And people need to think about Bitcoin the same way. Hire an expert who understands the plumbing part of Bitcoin and pay them to do their job. But you need to run your business and find customers.
So kind of like a Fiverr, only a few steps up. But
Exactly.
You find the people, they write it, create it. They're basically your programming consultant then.
Exactly. That's exactly how I feel about it.
Where are these people located? How do we find them? Do we send them to your email? Should I get that out there?
Yeah. I mean, you can. So I do a little bit of consulting in the space. If you want to find it, I actually think it's wise to look at people like there are incubators, for example. So one would be the Satoshi Block Dojo is in the UK, and they do that kind of connection service between developers and business people, and they help you with your branding and marketing and sales and all that kind of stuff. Now, they take a little bit of equity in your idea as well, but part of it is that they are business experts that will guide you through the blockchain economy until you have a thriving company.
That's interesting. So you could basically hit a deal with them that, yeah, okay, I'll pay you this much or whatever. But, if you like this idea and they see value in it, they'll take an equity part and you're basically partners and you're off and running.
Exactly. So there's stuff like that. There's also, the Bitcoin Association. Like, you can reach out to them and say, hey, I have a business idea. I'm looking for developers that can help me launch idea X, and they are happy to do a little bit of matchmaking for you and connect you to some people that can help as well.
What road bumps do you see in the near to midterm future for BSV?
Ignorance in the market. I mean, people want to buy a coin and do nothing and then get rich, and like I understand that. That's great. It's really good when you nail an investment and make a lot of money for no work. Like, that's an awesome thing. But ultimately, the technology needs entrepreneurs to put in some sweat equity and some money and actually build things. And that's a tough sell right now because money has been cheap for a very long time, and anybody that's invested in almost anything has made a lot of money. So we have a very soft and lazy mentality about money and economics and stuff in general. Because really it's been subsidized by just bad monetary policy and inflation and everything else. And ultimately, I think that's going to change. And as it changes, only the tougher are going to do well. And if you're not particularly tough, I think you're really going to struggle. And that's going to affect everybody. That's really, it's funny because I've always said, like, BSV, its primary use case is in a growing market full of hungry entrepreneurs, and that's just not the environment that we really live in right now. We live in an environment where people are scared of government policy, they're scared of censorship, and they also don't really want to work, and that plays into the investment thesis of BTC really, really well. It was this fear. It's the pandemic and all these other things closing in on them. Like, I need an asset that is uncorrelated to the real world, and I thrive if the world turns to chaos, which in many ways it has. And so we've seen the performance of BTC play to those circumstances. So I think that's the biggest roadblock for sure, is that BSV is like a shovel saying, hey, if you're willing to dig that mountain out, there's a bunch of gold in there. And people say, ooh, sounds like a lot of work.
Going back to the casino mentality just briefly, BSV price is $100 or so, give or take 10 or 20. Is it being depressed artificially, in your opinion, by different markets?
I think so. Changes? Yeah. So the way that money flows around in the blockchain economy is really, really seedy. It's shady. Like, we don't know where it comes from. We don't know where it goes to. Most of the trades on these exchanges are wash trades. They're done on private books. The market makers are the market makers for all of the major exchanges, so they don't have exclusive market makers. So they're able to collude with each other behind the scenes. If you make a market deal, you're probably not actually dealing with the market books. You're dealing with the market maker. And so there's all kinds of stuff where it seems like a free market, but in reality, there's a handful of puppet masters that just kind of decide where the price is going to go on basically everything. And so there's also the problem of Tether, which is basically the asset to which everything is correlated in the space. And we know for a fact that they're running a fractional reserve and that they're printing money out of thin air. When you can print money out of nothing, you can push the market around any way you want. So I think there's quite a bit of manipulation. And then the other half is that BSV is just plainly unpopular because those same influencers tell people that it is bad. And so we don't get a bunch of retail froth coming in to buy it. And then we get the people that have the big fake money in the economy are able to use that fake money to hold the price down by using tricks with like margin trades, basically holding large shorts open and paying the interest with money that you're printing out of nowhere.
How is that even legal?
It's not. It plainly isn't.
While I was here listening to your talk, that made me think of something. At one point, I looked at Doge, and I look at the initial supply, and I think BSV is what, 11 million or 12 million.
There's 21 million. It's 21 Bitcoin. Million. Bitcoin is 21 million, and BSV
and I
is
think
just
when
that.
I looked at Doge, it had unlimited.
It could be, yeah. And there's billions in circulation already, if I recall,
of Doge.
Yeah.
And what that means is basically, if it's unlimited, it's like printing money out of thin air. Someone somewhere can say, it is time to depress. It's time to rise. It's, but yet, and none of the people that I had hoped to be here to ask you questions are here yet. We're running out of time, but let's see if we got a couple more. Okay, can you talk about this? Talk about hand cash just a bit.
So hand cash is an extremely functional Bitcoin SV wallet. It is it allows you to make payments that are less than a penny. So it's very functional in places like the Philippines or Zimbabwe or wherever else. And it's got a really great interface. It uses a handle system. So instead of having to send to a QR code, my hand cash handle is just Kurt, for example. So people can say, send money to Kurt. And that's much simpler than scan my QR code or send to this 30 digit string of numbers or whatever else. So they've made a lot of that very simple. Now, over the last year, they've also added like an application library that allows you to play all kinds of games or use all kinds of apps and interact with all these other companies. It also functions as your login. So now I'm logged in with my hand cash handle onto things like Haste Arcade or Genuine Retweets or whatever else. And now, just this week, they are launching finally fiat currency on ramps. And then ultimately off ramps are coming soon as well. So if I want to just buy $5 worth of BSV so that I can play arcade games or make a Tonic Pow campaign, I can just do that.
That's what I was going to ask you. People who are watching this probably have no idea, where do I get this amazing thing called BSV? Do they got to go to an exchange in Korea? I mean, what's the best and easiest way?
So it's not launched now, but I believe it is launching this week. It may happen at any moment. Maybe there's been an announcement while I was on the stream. I've actually been a tester, and I have successfully purchased through hand cash myself.
Really?
But at this point next week, we should be completely available on hand cash. You connect your credit card, and you can buy 50, 5, 10, or 50 or whatever. They have a few different levels, and it's instantly available. The second you click go, it's in your wallet. You're ready to rock and roll. There's no wait 20 minutes or any of that nonsense. Like, you can be playing games in 2 minutes.
Who are listening to this who are not really familiar, that's a big deal. For a while back in 18 or 19, when I was buying my early BSV, I bought it through an exchange called KuCoin. But then I think last year, some year, I don't know if this was their attempt or why they did it, but they would like turn off withdrawals. So you would buy it and you would be terrified you could never get it out. And so I just stopped doing it that way. And then there were other options, but they weren't quite as clean as what you're describing. Hey, we're starting to get, I think, a couple questions here.
Yep.
So let's go to this one. I don't know what. Can you address that? What
Sure.
you think for me?
So this is an important one. The coin supply has no meaning in and of itself. This is true. So technically, Bitcoin, there are 21 million Bitcoins, but each Bitcoin is made up of lots and lots of Satoshis. So there's actually 21 trillion little units of account. So if you want to send something less than a whole Bitcoin, you can do that. And those sub Bitcoin transactions are, Satoshi transactions. Now, right now, a single Satoshi is worth some infinitesimal fraction of a penny, like 100,000th of a penny or whatever. And so this is a really nice unit of account that allows like machines to communicate with each other. For example, like think a digital handshake between your vacuum cleaner and your toaster or whatever. Like it allows them to just have a secure communication channel where they're not really transferring money, but they do need to send a secure message to one another for whatever Internet of Things application exists in that space. And so that's actually the beauty of it. So in that sense, he's absolutely right. It really doesn't matter if there were 1 billion Bitcoins or 1 trillion or whatever, because in many ways actually already are. It depends on what you treat as the unit of account, but it's what are you measuring? It's the same as like how an inch is arbitrary, right? Like somebody just decided that an inch is an inch, and it's useful because we all agree that an inch is the same thing, and therefore it is a useful tool. But it's just a concept that we've accepted, and when you accept it as a unit of account, then we can all just base other things off of it.
So with 21 million plus, you can divide it out. What I'm thinking of is thinking 50 years down the way when 12 billion people are using digital stuff daily. That's where the need for such a large amount or pool come into play. Okay, so let's go to the next one and see what they say. Is Pakistan and Norway's interest in BSV from the government sector or the private sector?
Primarily government sector. So there's a lot of nations that really want to operate not only a central bank digital currency, but they also want to use like a national digital ledger concept for things like business titles, business registrations, home titles, like the kind of basic record keeping and title of ownership is a really good thing to use a blockchain for. So there's been a lot of interest from a lot of governments on using BSV and other blockchains. They're certainly looking at other blockchains as well. But BSV is really the only one that does the things that people say blockchains do. So I think even if we lose these like pilot programs, if people try to use Ethereum or Solana or XRP or whatever, they're ultimately going to say, okay, well, this worked for X amount of time. Like now what do we need to do to bring it to the next step?
How much more expensive is it to use ETH than BSV?
I mean, it's exponential. So the typical fee on BSV is 0.5 Satoshis per byte. So that comes out to somewhere between a 500th and a 1,000th of a penny. But the average fee on Ethereum is in the dollars right now. So
significant difference.
Yeah, significant difference. But and by dollars, like sometimes it's 5 and sometimes it's 500. So it's variable based on traffic as well. So on days when it's 500, that number in percentage difference is very, very large.
Got another question here. And Doge supply emission also trends to zero relative over time. Many think that Bitcoin hard cap is a feature, but as long as supply is known and verifiable, it's all the same. What say you?
I actually don't know Doge's supply curve, so I can't comment on that. But most of these cryptocurrencies do trend toward zero, that they want them to be scarce for whatever reason, in the belief that scarcity is valuable. And I understand why. I mean, I agree that the scarcity of Bitcoin is part of the reason that it has value, but he's right in that it's not so much the um, it's not so much that the scarcity should be the cornerstone of its value. It is still valuable as a ledger of data. The value is what's on the ledger. It's what you can create with it. And so the value of the coin itself is relative to its scarcity, but the value of what can be created with the coin, who cares how many of the coin there are, right? If I'm selling data to people, I don't care how many coins. Like maybe I'm not even using the coin for anything except just the simple transaction fee. And so I don't even hold the coin, but I'm making billions of dollars a year by using the network, and the coin is just my toll to use the network. So he's right, but it's about context.
Well, we got one here that looks like we got another convert.
There we go.
Yep. We got one here. Getting BSV in Canada right now is about as easy as getting it the North Korean way.
Yeah. No, it's true.
Okay, somebody's happy there. That's good. BSV's focus on environmental sustainability. That's good. Doge is okay. Okay, we're almost done here. And the last one here. Okay, BSV also leads all other blockchains in energy efficiency.
Yep.
What final to conclude here? We've been here going about an hour. What do you see midterm to short term coming up with BSV?
I mean, just nonstop excitement. Like there's big things coming. We've got a bunch of events going on, CoinGeek events and other external events. There's the Global Blockchain Conference in Dubai in May, but I'm much more excited about the businesses that are doing big things. Like there are companies that are coming online every day. Even something simple like POW Chess. It's just on-chain competitive chess. And people are playing, and it's exciting, and there's cool stuff going on there. I'm also my mining pool that I operate with a few friends is called Gorilla Pool. I'm super excited about offering more services there, really showing people how I think that the mining aspect of the network should be run so that we can enable more people to build businesses more easily.
What sort of tech do you need to be part of your Gorilla Pool?
So we actually just launched a new service where all you need is money. So to mine, you need an ASIC miner. You need something that is optimized for the hashing algorithm, which is SHA-256. Those are expensive to run. They are very hot. They're very loud. You really need to be a commercial operation unless you're going to run more than maybe one or two out of your own home. But if you're running one or two in your own home, it's basically like leaving a dozen blow dryers on at all times. Like they're that loud, they're making that much heat. It's a pain in the ass. So we are now offering co-location service where you can buy a miner from us. We will manage it in our location that has commercial electricity rates, and minus a little fee, you get the bitcoins that your machine earns. And you own the machine. It's your machine. They can ship it to you if you want to do that too. But ultimately, you're benefiting from the economies of scale by utilizing bulk purchased electricity and stuff like that as well. So packages start around $12,000, and that's your beginner level ASIC mining package. Now, if you really want to do it at home, you can get started for probably $1,000. But that would be you buying a used mining machine and you operating it at home, being in charge of its maintenance, which they require like cleaning at least once a quarter and other stuff. But if you want to get involved, we would love your business. We would love you to be mining BSV with Gorilla Pool.
What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Find me on Twitter. I'm at Kurt Wuckert JR. You can send me a DM. I answer all of my DMs on Twitter. You can also find me at Telegram at the same handle. So Kurt Wuckert JR, which I have in my, you can see it right here on screen. This is Kurt Wuckert Jr. I'm available there. Please send me a DM. There's also I have kurtwuckertjr.com. You can send a contact me through there, and we'll get in touch.
Kurt, I want to thank you for doing it. We went a little bit over, but for me, that's pretty good that we did it in about 65 minutes. So I want to thank you for showing up. A little disappointed I didn't get a couple of the mates who were asking me questions like, I don't know, but I know somebody who does. So, maybe I'll just, if they really keep asking me, I'll shoot you a DM on it. I want to thank you for being here on Beyond the Fringe. You have a great rest of the day and a great rest of the weekend.
You too. Thank you, Rico.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, with that, we are going to conclude, and I want to again thank Kurt for joining us, and hit the like, share, and subscribe button if you enjoyed it. And again, I got a new book out, Primer for Alien Contacts, there on the right. It's probably not what most people think, but I think it's one of my best books. Talks about kiphi, the bridge world. So with that, I want to say stay strange and be seeing you.
It's beautiful. It's fun. There's no fear there.